from my grandfather who served in World War II to my aunts and uncles who served in Vietnam and Afghanistan, and my own husband who served and was deployed as well. And I think about all of the others I don't know who served. On the eve of the day that our country honors you, we're honoring also the pain and the trauma that you live with. Today, we have the privilege of hearing the personal stories and perspectives of the veterans standing here today. As people who have been directly involved in wars, as people who have witnessed the horrors of conflict, as people who bear the physical and emotional scars that war leaves in its wake, their perspective on a ceasefire is incredibly valuable. Veterans know the true cost of war, the lives lost, the families shattered, and the communities scarred. They know the devastation and the pain that we are seeing now in Gaza and in Israel. They themselves can often relate to those around the world who are subjected to this violence, even here in America. Some may question our patriotism because we are questioning endless war, but there is nothing more patriotic than wanting our country to stand up for our professed values. In the words of Reverend Dr. Pauli Murray, I want to see America be what she says she is, and I consider it part of my responsibility to do that. We have all heard the phrase that history repeats itself, yet too often as a society we fail to recognize the repetition of war. The veterans that we will hear from today are here not only because they know the impacts of war, but they know that without action and without a true anti-war movement, war will continue generation after generation. It's time to change the pattern of history, to build a world where peace is valued over war, where we reconcile conflicts through peaceful negotiation, where we choose to take the path of love and humanity over death and destruction, regardless of how hard that choice may be. I thank the veterans here today for many things: standing up, speaking out, the risk that they're taking. But I specifically want to thank them for making that choice, for choosing peace, for choosing love, for choosing humanity, for choosing to demand a ceasefire now. Thank you all. And now I'm going to call up Lyle Jeremy Rubin, former Marine officer.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. Thanks to everyone, Brittany, everyone else who helped organize this event. When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. Since childhood, I've heard these words from one Passover Seder to the next, bellowed by the legendary singer and actor Paul Robeson. My great uncle and aunt have hosted the Seder for decades, and they have always gone out of their way to connect our people's story of oppression and liberation to that of others. When Robeson performed the famous slave song in 1965, he was drawing a line from the Jewish freedom struggle to the Black freedom struggle. But it wasn't until I joined the Marines not long after 9/11 and helped enforce the military occupation of Afghanistan in 2010 that I came to realize the wider importance of that spiritual and how much I had failed to learn its deepest lesson. When I developed lethal targeting packages for strangers on a safe intelligence watch floor, I knew I wasn't playing the part of Moses. when I accompanied my Marines on armed foot patrols where we menacingly paced through the fields of frightened farmers, I knew I wasn't on the side of liberation. And the more I participated in the violent policing of desert hamlets, the more I felt like another pharaoh. Today I stand here with every fiber in my being to insist that the ongoing bloodshed in Gaza and the West Bank will not bring anyone emancipation. Certainly not the Palestinians, who have already endured more death and destruction in the past month than most war-torn people suffer after year-long operations. But not the Israelis either, who are only fueling the flames of resentment and rage that brought both Israel and Palestine to this awful crossroads in the first place. After 20 years of fighting our own war on terror, and after hundreds of thousands dead, have we still not learned it's impossible to kill one's way to safety, to freedom? Too many lives have already been lost, too many people subjugated and humiliated, not just the past month, but for years and decades, from Gaza City to Hebron to East Jerusalem. Ceasefire now.
Now we call up Congresswoman Delia Ramirez.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. I am Congresswoman Delia Catalina Ramirez, and I have the honor to represent Illinois' 3rd Congressional District. These have been hard days. The hostages held by Hamas are still not home with their families. Over 11,000 Gazans are dead, and even more are wounded or missing. And this week, my colleagues have chosen to censure those, or that one, Palestinian Congresswoman because she dares to dissent. Choosing hope right now is an act of resistance. I am hopeful because I am reminded we are not alone in calling for what is right. We are not alone in our fight. So I want to start by recognizing the courage of everyone here today, upholding our shared humanity and calling for a ceasefire. Thank you to my friends and colleagues, Congresswoman Cori Bush and Congresswoman Summer Lee. I especially want to thank the veterans, those who served our communities, those who risked their lives for a war that has left them asking themselves, why were we sent there? Those who are advocating for peace right now. I've had the honor and responsibility to serve in the Veteran Affairs Committee. And during my time in the committee, I've heard over and over and over again how crucial it is that we listen and we follow the lead of our veterans. And I agree. They are here to let us know loud and clear that we have to change the years of failed foreign policy. They are here to show us through their lived experiences that our current course will not lead us to long-lasting peace. We know that a true and lasting peace for both Israeli and Palestinians can only be achieved through the recognition of our interdependence and a commitment to diplomacy. We must reject a doctrine that only some lives are worth protecting, and recognizing that the lives, that the futures, and the collective safety of Israelis and Palestinians is intertwined. The solutions we put forward and support should affirm our shared humanity and reject all forms of dehumanization, scapegoating, and collective punishment. As a nation, we must use our influence and the power as world leaders to affirm our commitment to human rights, international law, and de-escalation. I serve in a committee who every single hearing says that they want to do everything they can to take a stand for their veterans. Well, here I am standing with veterans today. We are preparing ourselves to celebrate their contributions, their sacrifices, but we should also be listening to their pain, listening to their voices. And we like it or not, we must acknowledge that we have a choice in this moment. Do we listen to our veterans, or do we continue to bomb ourselves and then say that's what's going to bring us to peace? There's dissonance in that. And I am proud and honored to join my colleagues, human rights advocates, veterans, and the whole world who is calling in this precise moment for us to cease fire now. Let's hear our veterans. Let's do what our veterans are calling us to do. And with that, I'd like to call Brittany Ramos de Barros, Afro-Latina combat veteran and former Army captain.
It's all right, we'll give it a minute. My name is Brittany Ramos de Barros. I'm a former Army captain and combat veteran who deployed to a war in Afghanistan, believing that I was going to eradicate the threat, as politicians like to say, and improve security both for Afghans and for my own people here in the United States. What I actually did was participate in a war that killed tens of thousands of people and further destabilize a country that continues to suffer today. 20 years of bombing and killing, and none of us is any safer. In fact, by our own government's measures, every single place that the United States and NATO carried out so-called global war on terror operations, we have made things worse instead of better. Today, it's so obvious to me that the politicians who resist ceasefire in the name of security know nothing about war. Because anyone who has any humanity left in them and has actually confronted the utter horror and absolute carnage of shockwaves rippling through their bodies as mothers scream, as dust settles around mangled bodies, knows how absurd it is to believe that security can be created through violence. The trauma and destruction and destabilization caused by war are antithetical to security. I won't speak to you about morality, because if you aren't already calling for a ceasefire, with more than 10,000 killed, mothers, fathers, children, then you either don't care about the sanctity of life or you don't believe that Palestinians are human beings. So let pragmatism guide you. There is no military solution to this violence. We cannot bomb our way to peace. We cannot kill our way to safety. Neither can Israel. Those who say a ceasefire only helps Hamas subscribe to a short-sighted military strategy that has been empirically disproven repeatedly and never, not once, been successful or effective. If you manage to eliminate all of Hamas, what then? The root cause of this violence is an illegal occupation and routine human rights abuses that have gone on for decades. If those root causes are not addressed, another group more determined, more motivated to do what Hamas did will emerge and the violence will continue. This weekend, politicians will be shaking our hands and thanking us for our service, all while continuing to fail us. They continue to ignore the will of the American people who want a ceasefire. They continue to ignore the will of veterans who are sick of being sent to kill and die in wars that make politicians and war profiteer donors richer. If you actually respect us, if you actually want peace and safety, if you actually believe in the values of human rights and justice that this country professes to uphold, and the values that I was told I was signing up to fight for when I joined the military, you will join us in calling for a ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Next, we have Congresswoman Summer Lee.
Good afternoon. I'm Summer Lee, and I'm proud to represent the 12th Congressional District of Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, Westmoreland counties of Pennsylvania. And I'm proud to stand here today with my courageous sisters in service, Congresswoman Cori Bush and Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, and almost a dozen and counting colleagues for their clear-eyed pursuit of peace, to about face, and all the proud veterans we have here today who can speak more truly than anybody about the realities of war and why we must do everything humanly possible as a Congress and as a country to avoid it, to move toward a just and lasting peace, and to demand a ceasefire right now. This Saturday will be my first Veterans Day as a Congresswoman, and as we reflect on the sacrifices that these veterans standing beside and with us today and so many others have made, we're once again watching our nation and our nation's leader throw itself 10 toes deep into yet another catastrophic war that has no visible endpoint or strategy. But the costs have been made abundantly clear to every one of us here. Since Hamas murdered 1,400 innocent Israelis 1 month ago, nobody has questioned that Hamas must be held accountable. But let's be clear, it is innocent Palestinian civilians that are paying the price for crimes that they did not commit. Israeli airstrikes, the ground invasion, and forced starvation and dehydration has caused over 10,000 innocent Palestinian lives, including more than 4,300 children. Reports from the Israeli military indicate, we'll let that pass. It's DC, it happens. Reports from the Israeli military indicate that they have successfully targeted just 60 plus Hamas operatives. That means that the Israeli military has had a civilian casualty rate of 99%. 99% of the people who have been killed were civilians. They were mothers and fathers, grandparents and hospital workers and peacekeepers and teachers and community members and babies. People who are seeking refuge in churches and mosques and schools. People being transported or near ambulances. We can't afford to make the same mistakes that we made after 9/11, entering two endless wars for decades with no success. And all we have to show for it was an even more unstable Middle East and a loss of 4.5 million lives, including 7,000 service members. There will always be people who find who find warmongering profitable, whether it be politically or financially. But that's not what the majority of people in this country and our world want. They want a just and lasting peace in Palestine and Israel. They are demanding that our country change its course in unconditionally supporting a war that has largely been on Palestinian children. We, the people, are not the fringe. We, the people, are the majority. We are the UN, the Amnesty International, Doctors Without Borders, veterans, and the Pope, clergy, and rabbis, and imams, and government leaders around the world, and millions of everyday people who have called for a ceasefire to end this humanitarian catastrophe and work towards a just and lasting peace. Now, more than ever, we need to listen to the people who are closest to the pain. That means listening to the Palestinians on the ground who cry for us to protect their innocent lives, to the Israelis protesting the Netanyahu government for its warmongering, to the only Palestinian woman in Congress, instead of silencing her and burying her perspective, and to these veterans who know better than anybody what war entails and who are telling us that we must demand a ceasefire. We have to listen to them when they recount the atrocities of war, atrocities that they don't want anybody else to live through. We are the nation's pro-peace movement. All of us who seek to build the future where defense means investing in our community's healthcare, in housing, in education, and jobs, not lining the pockets of defense contractors who seek to profit off of our veterans' suffering. And we are the majority. Building that future starts right now by demanding a ceasefire to end this cycle of endless violence that has no military solution. Peace is attainable if we don't fall for the facade of war and destruction as a solution and a pathway to peace. Thank you so much to our veterans who welcomed me here today and who bravely came to stand with us clear-eyed from the fog of war to demand a ceasefire right now. And thank you so much to the countless people across this country and this world who have stood up in the face of so much risk and threats to their own safety and livelihood to join us in our cause for peace. Our next person will be Ramon Mejia. I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce that, but I'm gonna let you say your name clearly for the people here. And this is a former Marine.
My name is Ramon Mejia. In 2003, I participated in the U.S. invasion of Iraq. I witnessed the havoc U.S. bullets and bombs waged on people and the land, effects felt to this day. We were told that our actions were to free the Iraqi people from tyranny, but all I saw was the enormous human, social, economic, and environmental toll that war and occupation brought. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis were killed in an illegal war begun with lies, while millions more were maimed and injured. The reverberating effects of war continue to kill and sicken countless people to this day. I live with the knowledge that my actions contributed to the destruction of life, a result of which has led to the people of Iraq having the highest, quote, the highest rate of genetic damage of any population ever studied. In the years after leaving the Marines, as I attempted to process my experience, and while part of the Muslim community, I became close with a number of Palestinian families. They accepted me into their homes, into their community. Palestinians have experienced relentless attacks by one of the world's most advanced military systems, reliant on U.S. arms and protected by U.S. diplomacy. According to UN report, quote, waging disproportionate destruction and violence against civilians is part of a deliberate policy by the Israeli military, end quote. These are the actions being perpetrated now against the people of Gaza, against innocent civilians and children as they are pulled from the rubble of US-funded, US-built Israeli-dropped bombs. In 2018, I had the opportunity to travel to Palestine as part of a delegation to hold conversations with, learn from, and build with Palestinian grassroots groups from various sectors of society, beautiful people who are steadfast in their commitment to resist against all odds the face of oppression. The daily struggles and dehumanizing treatment of Palestinians endured the hands of Israeli soldiers is unfathomable. The situation unfolding and and around Gaza is part of a long and uninterrupted history of violence, the root of which is Israelis' brutal occupation and military siege. We implore conscious forces everywhere to apply pressure on all fronts to remind U.S. elected leaders of their responsibility to act and to loudly and unrelentingly echo the international call for a ceasefire now. Long live a free Palestine. I would like to introduce my friend, Crystal Tubles, Army combat veteran.
My name's Crystal Tubles. I'm Oglala Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, from Northern Cheyenne Territory in southeastern Montana, Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. I'm a veteran and former sergeant in the U.S. Army. But as a Native American, as an Oglala woman, as a Cheyenne woman, I know exactly what is happening in Palestine. It is the exact same thing that happened to my people here on these lands, happening in real time. The dehumanization, the land theft, the massacres, and then the invisibilization of an entire people. At least 11,000 human lives are gone. 4,300 of those children gone. The images, the stories that I see every day are all too familiar to me. They resemble the stories I heard from my grandparents while growing up. As an anti-war veteran, I know that the U.S. is complicit in this. We've experienced that. Our taxpayer dollars pay for death, pay for destruction, pay for violence. They say that where you spend your money is what you value. We need to think about that. In moments like this, though, we have to remember that the decisions that we make define us as human beings. This is the moment that needs to bring out the best in us. So as a veteran and as an original steward of these lands that we are all standing on, I implore the people who are put here to actually represent us to make the right decision and to demand a ceasefire now. Miach. Oh, and I'd like to bring up my sister, Arti Walker. She can introduce herself.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Arti Walker Padakotla. I am an Indian American daughter of immigrants, a U.S. Army veteran who served from 2000 to 2006. I first want to say, as I'm standing here, and Representative Rashida Tlaib is not here with us, but I want to say that veterans stand with you. So, to the 22 cowardly Democrats who voted on the censure, veterans stand with Rashida, and we stand with Palestinians, and we stand with Cori Bush and Summer Lee and Delia Ramirez. During my military service, I was deployed to Dover Air Force Base, which is the largest mortuary in the Department of Defense. When I was deployed there, I assisted in the autopsies of soldiers killed in action in the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. The horrors of the war that I witnessed there changed me forever. And joining the military wasn't a choice, because the only option available to me as the daughter of somebody who was child abused and sexually abused was the school to military pipeline, just like the school to prison pipeline or the school to prison nexus is the only option available to others. People that die in war do not die natural deaths. During my deployment at Dover, I saw bodies with heads blown off, skins completely burnt, intestines coming out of heads, rotting flesh turned green and blue, and bullets in every imaginable place, and bodies so badly traumatized that there was nothing remaining to identify them. As a result of what I bore witness to at Dover, Delaware, I receive a disability from the VA for anxiety and depression. And what that tells me is that our government does and can recognize the horrors of war. Our government does recognize and does understand how war destroys not just the people directly experiencing it, but also destroys the souls of those who commit those atrocities. So the question I have for the Congresspeople is, if you care about the trauma that veterans face, as you should, why do you not care about the trauma that Palestinians are facing too? I have seen videos of a child in Palestine screaming that they had to carry a headless body. Of another child screaming because they realized their mother was under the rubble because of her hair, and they said, "I know her hair." And that's the only thing they could see of her. That is trauma that they will never recover from. Over 11,000 civilians have been killed. 70% of those that are killed are women and children. People are now dying out of starvation, the lack of life-saving medical equipment or medicine. And the United States is directly funding and enabling these horrors. To any representatives who have yet to sign on to the ceasefire resolution, including my own cowardly representative, Danny Davis from Illinois, you are being put on notice. Do not show up to Veterans Day marches. Do not shake hands with veterans and say that you support veterans if you do not support a ceasefire. That's right. What do veterans want?
Ceasefire now.
When do veterans want it?
Now.
What do veterans want?
Ceasefire now.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do veterans want?
Ceasefire.
When do we want it?
Now.
Thank you.
I think that the most important voices you've already heard, and there are more here. We wish we could give the mic to every single veteran standing here. But as we open up we have time for maybe one or two questions, and when we point to you, make sure you say your name and your outlet. But before we switch to that, I want us, before questions are thrown out, us to think about the dignity of the veterans that are standing here. And let's give them the respect that is so deserved before we start with questions. Because this is a moment that we want to highlight. As members of Congress, we want to highlight them. We want their voices to be known and told. They're standing up saying ceasefire now. They're standing up saying, I'm putting myself on the line and at risk because this country should listen. And so, as we open up for questions, I'm asking for the respect for our veterans, because the pancake meal tomorrow or Saturday is not, that's not, that. I mean, it's great. I hope y'all get y'all pancake meal. But let's respect them as we go forward with these questions. Yes, Nick. Say your, I know you, but you say, yeah.
Nick Will with Politico. Israel is saying that they will do 4-hour humanitarian pauses each day. Is that enough, or do you want more?
So I will give my answer, and if any of you would like to chime in, please, I would like for somebody to come forward. No. 4 hours. We get a break. The idea that we get a break for 4 hours, a break so that we can have food. I saw someone spoke about it and they said, thank you for giving us raisins for a few hours. And then do we go back to bombing? So absolutely not 4 hours. I never personally calls for a humanitarian pause, and I'm not going to call for a humanitarian pause, and I don't want to see, even though that is what's happening, a 4-hour-a-day humanitarian pause, because what we need is to stop the bombing. What we need is, what is that mental anguish when you know, well, we get a break for 4 hours, but as soon as that 4 hours is over, then what? How dare we treat humans in that way? How dare we be so careless and so inhumane and heartless to where we decide that 4 hours is enough time to just to get you some stuff so that you can live a little bit longer until the bombs hit? How dare we, and how dare we treat humans as if we don't understand what it's like to be human. And I'll lastly say this. A humanitarian pause. Yes, it is a one-sided, it is a unilateral decision. But when you have the world saying we want a ceasefire, when we have the people that actually are the ones that will go and be on the ground, that would have to be the ones to carry out, the ones that did carry out, that are saying, no, that's not the way. No. 4 hours. We don't want 4 hours. We don't want 16 hours. We don't want 22. We want a ceasefire now.
I just, if I can, I want to add that it's important to recognize that any pause that isn't accompanied by a strategy and a plan to cease international human rights abuses and violations of human law falls short of what we need and what's called for by agreed upon rules of engagement. Right. The pause, any pause that doesn't take into account that this is still a collective punishment once the 4 hours has ended is not sufficient. A pause that doesn't take into account that there are still 2 million people who are being collectively starved, dehydrated, that there are no functional hospitals right now, which would not allow for any humanitarian aid to be applied. It falls short of the standards that this country has agreed to, that other countries throughout this world has agreed to. And that's why we're asking, and that's why we're demanding the ceasefire, because we need to know what the end goal is. Once and if Hamas is eradicated, what will be left standing? Will there be any civilians left? Will there be any civilian infrastructure, hospitals, churches? There are no universities that are functioning left in Gaza. So I think that those are the things that we really need to be honest about. And I think that as Israel's ally, as the government that contributes $3.8 billion every year without any additional supplemental aid going into it, that we have a deep responsibility to make sure that we are holding them accountable to international laws and the laws of humanity.
So you said Israel is calling for a 4-hour pause, correct? Okay, agreed. And who's doing the bombing? Who's doing the bombing? Right? Is Palestine calling for a 4-hour pause, or are they calling for a ceasefire? The people who are bombing indiscriminately and have bombed so much, more than what was bombed at the height of the war in Afghanistan in just a month alone, a 4-hour pause isn't going to save lives. A 4-hour pause isn't going to get people food. A 4-hour pause isn't going to get people medical care when NICUs are being shut down and hospitals are running out of energy and people don't have water. We need a ceasefire.
Leaving the White House on his way to Illinois, he was asked what are the chances of a Gaza ceasefire. He said none, no possibility. I want to get your response to the president, the leader of the Democratic Party, to the question of a ceasefire as early as most recently as this morning, when he said none, no possibility.
Yeah, you know, we're going to keep pushing for a ceasefire. The one thing about it is I was elected to speak my own voice, the voice of my community, my district. So was Summer Lee. So was Dilgy Ramirez. So were so many others. All of the 18 of us that are on the Ceasefire Now resolution that are all Black and brown people. So were those who are also calling for a ceasefire just around the world. They have their reasons why in their organizations, and even those nations who stood up to say we're calling for a ceasefire. So yes, if the president, I have not seen that. So I will say I have not seen that. So I have not heard it. This is the first I'm hearing about it. But I will say we will keep pushing and we will keep fighting. It takes me back to the days in Ferguson when we were pushing and fighting and we were saying that you can't keep killing us. You know, you can't keep killing Black folks, you know, disproportionately in this country and we not say anything. And you're doing it with impunity. So, you know what, we're going to be in these streets. Black Lives Matter. And they were saying, no, you can't say that. It's all lives matter. And we said, no, we're going to keep on fighting. And we fought and we fought and we marched and we organized and we continued. And then a few years later, all of a sudden, oh, you know what? You all were right. You know what? And so I have hope that it won't take, number one, that long. I'm seeing this change. You know, we're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep pushing. We're going to stay in the streets. You know, people are going to keep organizing. Folks that have voices and experiences that we don't. That's who are the ones also leading this. And so we need people to understand that veterans, they have been there and they are saying. And so for our commander-in-chief, if that is his position today, there is also this afternoon and a tonight. There is a tomorrow, there is a Saturday and a Sunday. And so I expect that there will be change, and there will be change because we won't stop. The people won't stop. The people that elected this president are screaming out saying, we want a ceasefire now. And so we believe that our president will hear us.
I would like to speak directly to the president, and I speak for myself only. I was a commissioned captain in the Army. If I had been handed a mission and my response was that it was not a possibility, I cannot imagine that that would have been accepted. Mr. President, you are the commander-in-chief of one of the most powerful militaries on the face of this planet, in the history of the world. How can you be so powerful and so weak as to say that you are incapable of negotiating peace? How embarrassing for you. The Army values that I was taught to uphold as a commissioned officer are leadership. Leaders don't speak about what is impossible. Leaders find ways to facilitate the conditions that make things possible. Integrity. How can you stand before us as a commander-in-chief with any integrity and claim that you are powerless in this situation when our country, our tax dollars, give Israel $18 billion a year, if not more? If you believe that the president is incapable of negotiating peace, I have an $18 billion bridge to sell you.
Okay. And we are going to take one last and final.
So critics say that you're wrongly calling for a ceasefire because you're dealing with an enemy who says they're not going to stop until all Israelis are dead. You still have scores of hostages still out there, some of which Americans. What would your response be to the critics? How would you bring the folks home, given the response?
There's no military solution to this. You can't bomb, and we've heard it over. I'm not sure who spoke to it already. One of our veterans spoke to that. We can't bomb our way to peace. We can't think that without a ceasefire that we will get to a place where we can save civilian lives and end this. We're already at 11,000 humans that did not have to die. This was a decision. And let's be clear, this was a choice. This did not have to be. It did not have to be yesterday or the day before or a week ago. It did not. This could have changed. And so, a ceasefire lays the foundation for the diplomatic negotiations that we need to see. And this is how the door opens for that broader peace agreement. And so as the critics say, no, this won't work. Because let us also remember, did bombing get rid of the Taliban? How also do you think that you can bomb a whole people, kill a whole people? And I will say what I've said before, and what the UN, based upon their definition of ethnic cleansing, and ethnic cleansing happened right now before our eyes. How can we say that won't make someone who is still alive say, you know what? You took out my family. Do we want to start that all over again? We need peace now. We need liberation now. We need to free Palestine now. We need to end the siege. We need to get food and fuel and electricity in. We need to get medical supplies in. We need to lift the blockade. That's what we should be talking about right now. And so to all of the critics, if it was your grandmother, if it was your kids, if it was you, and I'll say this lastly, and then we're going to close. I remember being on the ground during the Ferguson uprising, and I remember not knowing what to do with tear gas. The tear gas was hitting us and didn't know what to do. And I remember one day a delegation of folks from Palestine showed up and taught us what to do. And then from there, I knew how to survive the next day with all of the tear gas. But one thing that I saw, rubber bullets flying, there were dogs and all of the things that were happening. But if I just traveled a mile away, there was no tear gas. There was none of this happening. And it was just like people going on with their day. Well, that's what's happening right now for people who are not directly impacted, so we can remove ourselves and say, oh, well, we'll be, we just don't believe that that's the thing. If you were there, you would want somebody to make it happen, as we already heard. So if we're supposed to be this big powerhouse country, we can make it work and we can save lives. And so at the end of the day, our job has to be to save lives. And I will not move from that. And every single critic that says that you shouldn't say this and you shouldn't believe this, we have all of these veterans that say, ceasefire now. Thank you.
Are things in there? It don't matter. Like, I think my stuff might be
that's
in
your
there.
stuff.